And now I would like to invite back all three speakers to the stage, because there is a room for a 10 minutes discussion. Please, yeah, you can sit down. Very well. Thank you. And again, the rules are still the same. If you have any question, raise your hand. The microphone will be handed to you immediately. I see a question in the first row.
Thank you. Actually, it's not really a question, but just to share our experience. In Fondazione Teleton, we have created a program called Just Like Home that is aimed to support a family to come to Milan or to Naples, where we are running clinical trial with gene therapy, to easily arrive. And so the Just Like Home program include caregiver, cultural mediator, interpreter, psychologist, clinical research nurse that support the family from even before they are coming to Milan, but during the first interaction with the family and the referral physician, and then along all the journey to Italy and during the clinical procedures and follow-up visit. From my experience in the clinical trials, the sponsor generally cover the cost of the logistic cost. The problem is much more relating to for expanded access program when there is no coverage. Many country of origin doesn't provide any support for patients to come from other parts of Europe. So in this case, we really need to think how to support the family, and in some exceptional circumstances, Fondazione Teleton cover also the cost of the travels and accommodation, whatever is needed for the family.
Well, who will answer the question? Yeah, the red one is working.
Thank you.
And we will, meanwhile.
I'll try to answer you probably relating to my presentation. Yes, we do have very good experience with Milan. We did send 2 kids for ATM therapy maybe 3 years ago. It was a fantastic experience, great cooperation with doctors. So thank you for that. However, generally, this support, I think, should come from the state. There is a directive on cross-border healthcare, but there's also a social support regulation. Those 2 vehicles legislatively should be supporting the patients to travel while supported by state. There are national contact points in each country that should take care of that. However, somehow for rare disease patients, it does not really work that well. And it's very problematic and difficult to actually travel out unless they get support by doctors from their residents and from abroad. Yeah.
Yeah. Professor, you want to add something?
Very quick comment. I'm just actually going to say something nice about the Genetic Alliance report. So there's some great work in that. I recommend anybody have a look through it. But one of the key points that I picked out of that was that access to some of this care within a clinical trial context is better than outside the clinical trial. And the real problem when thinking about who will be given an offer of these treatments is how to get care outside the clinical trial, and that there's not enough thought given to that at all. So it is one of the findings in the Genetic Alliance report, similarly to what we're hearing here too. A very important aspect of what happens next.
Yeah, and I see that we have our first online question.
Yes, thank you. So early patient engagement in clinical trial is something we have been advocating for a long time at Myeloma Patient Europe. We have methods, patient expert training courses. However, from what I hear, it seems that clinical expert doesn't really know how to do it, when to engage and how to engage. So the question is, what is your recommendation to bridge that gap, meaning between patient organization willing to participate in the clinical development versus clinical researcher who doesn't really know how to do it?
So I'm going to suggest something that I think it would be good for us to take up as a potential route of action. which is that one of the potential solutions, which might not feel very comfortable given these challenges, is radical transparency around what it takes to do these trials. This is very hard, I think, for a lot of stakeholders in the community to take on board because we're very protective of our data, our information, our approaches to things. I would argue that a way to increase capacity is to make the information you need in order to up that capacity freely available. And by doing that, and by doing that well, we will raise overall the European voices around what are standards, what we think is good trial design, what we think is good inclusion. But that can only be done in a very practical way by all of us saying, we're going to tear down these walled gardens, and we are going to make this information available. And at each step, we are going to make that information available. That's something that we have to very meaningfully take on board and that we need to do intelligently. We have to be scrappy. We need to be scrappy and radically transparent, not just because it's important to do, but because that's the only way out to up the capacity would be my suggestion there.
Totally agree. I'm just thinking of those ultra rares. They have no patient organizations really, and they are fending for themselves. So there has to be individual approach in this area.
I look to the audience and I see a question from Professor Demon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I wanted to just react to the presentation by Anna. So I know that there are two ways.
Sorry. Two of us. We'll both do it.
Yeah. The right one.
Your right or my right?
So, yeah. So there are two ways. There are two ways of getting rid of the national boundaries in terms of clinical trial. The first one is to bring the trial to the patient, meaning opening site in a new country. The second one is what you described, bringing the patient to the trial, meaning making it possible for the patient to cross the border. I had a phone call recently with Ingrid Klingman, who was the driver of this Heroic City initiative, because she's looking now for a sustainable solution for this project. And I think we have to discuss, and I think we would be very happy to involve you in the discussion. We have to discuss further on what are the sort of services or support needed to make it possible to establish a system in Europe for cross-border. There are needs in terms of regulation, but there are needs also in terms of practical support. And I think ECRIN could be one of the organizations who could help not only to help the clinical trial to cross the border, but also help the patient to cross the border to have access for rare disease, ultra rare disease, or for ATMP trial to be able to cross the border and to have access to clinical trials that are not open, activated in their country.
Anna can answer.
Well, yes, thank you. There's definitely yes from me to start working and coming up with something more concrete. Cross-border healthcare and cross-border access to clinical trials. It's just cross-border participation and access in general that I think the European Commission needs to start working on, so it makes it easier both for experts and patients.
Thank you very much. We still have room for one or two questions. Thank you. I see. Go on.
Anna in the middle. Yeah. So I like your idea of radical transparency. However, this might depend on the context, because the question is also, where's our role as academia? And I think if we talk about the big shots where we go, and for me, the big indications are also acute lymphatic ALL for kids. It's still a big indication. And they have new drug developments. They have protective IP. There you can harm very early a compound without any reason and take away the incentive. However, for rare diseases where you have little indications, when you go to hospital exemptions outside clinical trials, I'm also a strong advocate, for example, to just reporting outcomes in public registries to also mirror sort of what is happening. I think that's also what the Commission is looking forward to.
Yeah, can I just say that I think all of us in this room, we spend so much time thinking about advanced therapies, the biology behind it, the science. I think we don't know how far off we are from the public and general layperson's understanding of advanced therapies and the IP. We aren't remotely going to touch IP if we start talking about a lot of these, the foundational work, right? You can't understand why the IP is an IP or should be an IP until you know what a transcription factor is, until you understand what an AAV is, until you understand how these processes potentially, even theoretically, are going to work in a body. Because the public, I think we need to remember how far off we have science education. A stat that I think is really important to remember, even when dealing with people like elected officials. Elected officials, by and large, in most of our representative bodies, come from a legal background. That means the last time they were in a science classroom, they were 14, 15, 16 years old. There is a gulf of understanding, and we cannot get excited about the outcomes. Mean nothing if I don't understand the context in which that small but important step forward that is contained within an IP is, where it's coming from, the context around it. There is a ton of work that we could be doing to shape that pre-work that then allows it that when you have a press release that needs to go out, that it actually lands. That what your achievement is actually has any kind of impact. If we don't raise literacy, scientific literacy around gene and cell therapies and advanced therapies, there is no way for us to gauge impact and to generate the capital, social, institutional, and otherwise that we need to get these things to patients. That hopefully helpful.
Thank you. And we will have one last question from Professor Sterba. Yeah.
Thank you. Just a follow-up comment to transparency and registries. We have plenty of real-world evidence data, but the question is what is the quality of the data? How we can improve the quality of real-world evidence? And it brings us to the question who owns the data, who pays for the data, and who can maintain the data, yeah, which is not a trivial question.
So data, I think, is a step past. I think it is really important for us to understand that the public and patients and people who are not in these rooms, they come up against a wall of lack of information. So when we have not published what questions are we investigating, what is the trial? We can publish the trial design, and we can publish why we made these choices in a trial design. Because if we don't do that, non-experts go, well, there's no information on this, therefore they're not thinking about it. Whereas the reality is all of you are in your niche areas, absolutely diving deep into these issues. I don't think we need to touch public publishing of data. We need to publish the process.
I want to say I totally agree. This goes back to my second story of my presentation of the FAP family who had so many clinical trials, and they had no idea which one was good for them, which one to address, because there simply was a disclosure on the process of the clinical trial.
Very quick last point. A long time ago, I was involved in some guideline work, and we were thinking about how to present information to members of the public, to health professionals and policymakers. And to cut to the chase, everybody prefers the stuff that you present to patients. In other words, work that has been done to present information in a way that everybody can understand is appreciated by everybody, including people like us. So it requires work to present that information well, but everybody prefers it. Who wants to have to work to understand something if that work has been done for you? So it's an important area, and is an area where you can work with patients and public to think through how should this information be presented. So there's a role for patients in dissemination, not only in the design.
Thank you all. Thank you for your discussion.